Superstation of Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, February 17th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. It's been a very, very busy day. As we continue African American History Month, we know on yesterday, on Tuesday, I did a African American History Month presentation for a corporation, and then I did an online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Did that at 8 p.m. And our guest speaker was Sister Nubia Wartford, a cultural anthropologist. And then I did the show, African History Network show, 11 p.m. And we're back today. So it's been very, very busy. So on today's show, I want to deal with this topic. There was a story from out of California, and face-to-faceafrica.com had an article about this. And also there was a article from ABC Channel 7 in Chicago. And this ties right into racism, structural inequities. It ties into the redlining that the executive order from the Biden-Harris administration is addressing and calling for an investigation of to change the laws and deal with enforcement of the laws also. An African-American couple's home was valued at $500,000 higher after they had a white friend pose as the homeowner, showing a legacy of discrimination and racism on California home ownership. A black couple's home was valued at $500,000 higher after they had a white friend pose as the homeowner, showing a legacy of discrimination and racism in California home ownership. But we see this is historic across the country. And discrimination when it comes to home ownership is one of the main ways that we have been locked out of wealth creation and leads to structural inequities. And it's a legacy of slavery. It's a legacy of slavery and racism, Jim Crow, segregation, etc. So there was this article, the article from face-to-faceafrica.com and also Channel 7 ABC out of Chicago. And this ties into a study from the Brookings Institute that came out in November 2018. We've talked about it here on this show before. So those that have been watching this show for a few years know this, how a segregation tax is costing Black American homeowners $156 billion. How a segregation tax is costing African American homeowners $156 billion. African Americans, long accustomed to facing more hurdles on the road to home ownership, may consistently find their investments in residential property undervalued, according to a new joint Brookings Institution and Gallup study. Now, this is from November 2018. According to the devaluation of assets in Black neighborhoods, the case of residential property, which is the name of the study, owner-occupied homes are undervalued by the real estate market across all majority Black neighborhoods. Owner-occupied homes are undervalued by the real estate market across all majority African American neighborhoods and consistently sell or are appraised for lower prices at an average of $48,000 per home. at lower prices at an average of $48,000 per home. Nationwide, this amounts to $156 billion in cumulative losses, or what the report dubs as a segregation tax. African American homes collectively are valued at $156 billion less. Okay, so we're going to talk about this on the show. And then this ties also into the study that I've talked about numerous times from Citigroup Bank that came out in September 2020 that deals with how the U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion over a 20-year period of time, not 400 years, not since slavery ended, but over a 20-year period of time from the year 2000 to the year 2020. The U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion over a 20-year period of time from the year 2000 to the year 2020. And if structural inequities are closed, if structural inequities are wiped out, the U.S. economy can increase by $5 trillion over the next 5 years. And that was in also the study from Citigroup, but it was also in the executive order from the Biden-Harris administration that we talked about that was signed on day one, that very few people talk about because a lot of people don't read. Okay, but we talked about that here numerous times on this show, so you know about it. Executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. Okay. All right. So we'll talk about that. And then now all this is connected. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, coming out of the ideology of European white supremacy for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism has nothing to do with calling people racial epithets and not liking people and calling people names and things like that. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. So there was another story I'm going to tie to this that I hadn't been able to talk about the past couple of days, but we've dealt with this before. The Justice for Black Farmers Act, which comes out of a history of discriminating against African American farmers when it comes to loans for them to operate their farms. So blackenterprise.com has an article from February 12, 2021. Senators Cory Booker and Raphael Warnock introduced bills to help minority farmers, especially African American farmers. This is the Justice for Black Farmers Act, the Justice for Black Farmers Act. So we'll talk about this today on the African History Network show. So everybody share this broadcasting on social media platforms. We're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. And then also I want to remind you that our online course, you can still register for it. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt. The Moors and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is an 8-week, 16-hour online course that I teach. And we deal with thousands of years of history. It meets on Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we deal with thousands of years of history, and we deal with ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet. We deal with Nubia, Ta-Nehisi, Nile Valley region of Africa. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. And the Moors taking the teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, and the Nile Valley region of Africa into Europe. And these teachings are going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. And we deal with what led to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We deal with thousands of years of history. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have video clips, book references. It's about 50 articles that I reference also. Okay. So you can still register for it. Now, we do the class live. All the sessions are recorded. Okay. So as soon as you soon as you register, you could watch Class 1 and Class 2. You watch the class we just did February 16th. And we had Sister Nubia Wardford as our guest speaker. So it's regularly $130 on sale, $80. You can watch from around the world. So we have bonus content also for you to watch as well. And then you'll be ready for our class Tuesday, February 23rd, when our guest speaker will be Dr. David Imhotep, author of the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Author of the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. And we'll deal with the African presence in the Americas going back at least 100,000 years ago. And he'll talk some about his new book, The First Americans Were Africans Revisited, which comes out. I talked to him Saturday. He said it'll be out by the end of March 2021. So by the end of next month. Okay. So visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com is right on the homepage of our website. And then we just posted the link here as well. So you can register for that. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content. All right. We're coming up on a break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Joel Wilson, President and CEO of JCW Computer Consulting, LLC, a technology implementation firm with over 20 years of satisfying customers. We offer a full spectrum of industry top-tier branded services. We are an authorized partner or reseller for Lenovo, Zoom, T-Mobile, Microsoft 365 and Surface tablets, Google Workspace, Acer, Asus, Samsung, PCmatic security software, and many more. Our online store features laptops, Chromebooks, computers, printers, accessories, and software. Businesses, take advantage of our free 1-hour Zoom tech consultation and know we offer top nationwide high-speed internet service providers, voice over IP, and cellular phone services. Home users, don't miss our current in-stock Chromebook inventory. Please visit us at jcwcc.com or call 215-879-6701.
For 25 years, the Black History 101 Mobile Museum has carried on the rich legacy of the Black Museum movement in America by showcasing original artifacts of the Black experience at colleges, universities, K-12 schools, corporations, libraries, conferences, and cultural events, making it the most traversed Black History mobile exhibit in American history. Dr. Khalid El-Hakim, the founder of the Black History 101 Mobile Museum, and he is a highly sought-after public speaker on topics of Black history, social studies, education, museum studies, hip-hop, and race relations. Dr. Khalid was named among the change makers for NBC Universal's Erase Hate campaign and listed as one of the 100 men of distinction for Black enterprise. He recently founded the Michigan Hip Hop Archive on the campus of Western Michigan University. The Black History 101 Mobile Museum is currently scheduling in-person and virtual exhibits nationwide. For more information, please contact the Khalid El-Hakim directly at 313-645-4197, 313-645-4197, or visit their website at blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. That's blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. You can also email him at bhistory101@yahoo.com, bhistory101@yahoo.com.
Are you getting ready for fall or winter? We have the solution for all seasonal clothing needs. Kemeticwear.com is the go-to online source for Kemetic African fashion and lifestyle products with a contemporary twist. We're committed to offering unique styles reflecting our African heritage. Kemeticwear.com is inspired by KemeticScribes.com to influence our people in learning and showing pride. Please visit our website at Kemeticwear.com.
Visit 4glossygirls.com. That's the number 4glossygirls.com, and follow them on Instagram at 4glossygirls. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, February 17th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Before we jump into this topic here, I want to remind you that it's coming up February 24th, Wednesday, February 24th, 2021, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The ladies of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, the Lambda Rho Zeta chapter, are having a virtual African American History Month celebration. Let's celebrate Black history. And we know that one of the co-founders of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, Huey P. Newton, was a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, my fraternity. And the Zetas are our sisters. So this is Let's Celebrate Black History. And I am one of the panelists. It's a panel discussion. I'm one of the panelists. So we have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So when you go to the homepage and scroll down, you'll see the information about the African History Network show on Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time, and Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to download the iHeartRadio app and search for the African History Network show and search for 910 AM Superstation. At our website, click on Listen to Podcasts. We have over 1,000 podcasts going back to 2010 of the African History Network show. You can click right here, read articles that I've written. Also, we have information about a 8-week online course. Click there for register here for the online course. You scroll down and we have information for the panel discussion. Let's Celebrate Black History. Okay. And click right here to register here. It's a free event to attend. It's on Zoom. You click here for register here, and you can register for it. Okay, so it's going to be excellent. Not because I'm on a panel, but maybe it'll be even better because I'm on the panel. Okay, but don't tell them I said that. So special shout out to Sister Marnice Jackson, who invited me to be on the panel. Okay, and then when you scroll down even more, we have our 15 DVD bundle pack, the Michael Imhotep Black History Month 15 DVD bundle pack also, if you want to order that as well. Okay, so that's coming up February 24th, okay, Wednesday, February 24th. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me at AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization. Now, just so y'all understand, now I can speak to corporations, my degrees in business administration. I know how to talk to white people, but I don't do Black History Month presentations to make white people feel comfortable with the oppression of African Americans. I know how to speak in corporate America. I have a background in corporate America, but just so you know, I don't do that okey doke runaway slave Black History Month presentations. Okay, I don't do that stuff. I deal with like real history, just so everybody understands. Okay, okay. Because some people just want to talk about runaway slaves and Harriet Tubman, things like that. That's important, but you have to understand that in the context of a greater history. All right, so let's jump into this topic here. So I saw this story, and we see these stories periodically. Right. I saw this story here from face-to-faceafrica.com. We posted this on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. You got over 5,000 likes. Black couple's home was valued $500,000 higher after they had a white friend pose as the homeowner. Okay. Now, racial discrimination in the housing system in the United States is a systemic problem, with several reports over the years exposing the significantly huge gap between African American and white homeowners. Okay, between African American and white homeowners. Though the reasons for that, including redlining, which comes from the Homeowners Loan Corporation, redlining starts about 1937, comes from a federal government entity. All right. So though the reasons for that, including redlining, challenges with securing home loans, and undervaluing African-American owned homes, are not hidden secrets, efforts to mitigate these setbacks have moved at a snail's pace. Efforts to mitigate these setbacks have moved at a snail's pace. Now, in California, a Black Bay Area couple shared their story on how their home was undervalued by a white appraiser. Despite making significant renovations amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, they did about $400,000 of renovations to this home. They believe race played a part. I'm going to go to this clip from ABC Channel 7 Chicago in just a second, Shakita. Now, speaking to ABC Channel 7, Paul and Tanisha Tate Austin said they purchased their Bay Area home in 2016 after initially struggling to close deals on properties they were interested in due to challenges, including being outbid on the property. They said they eventually became homeowners thanks to another African American family that wanted to sell their property off to African Americans. Now, the couple said when they moved into the 1960s built home, they invested heavily in renovations, spending $400,000 in constructing new floors, a deck, and a fireplace. They said they also installed new appliances and added 1,000 square feet of space as well as a whole new floor. I want to go to this clip here from ABC Channel 7 in Chicago that explains this story. Let's go to this clip, Shakita.
Ownership is the pathway to building wealth in America. But what's hard in the Bay Area is even harder for some.
And tonight, a look at the growing inequity in home ownership rates in the Bay Area. ABC 7 News race and culture reporter Julian Glover has the story of a Marin couple who almost got cheated out of $500,000.
You know what I mean? It was work, but it was exciting.
Paul and his wife, Tanisha Austin, felt like they captured a slice of the American dream in 2016 when they purchased their first home together, this original Marin City pole home. But it wasn't without challenges.
As soon as like a house came on the market, you go in, you put your bid in, and then you get outbidded by like 100,000 or more rather quickly. And that can be, you know, a little bit depressing.
They bought the home off market from another Black family, hoping to make homeownership a reality for a young Black couple. After moving into the home built in the 1960s, the Austins staged major renovations, adding an entire floor and more than 1,000 square feet of space, along with a deck, new floors, a fireplace, and new appliances. Then they got it appraised.
I read the appraisal. I looked at the number. I was like, this is unbelievable.
The family tells me the appraiser was an older white woman, and they're convinced race was a factor. The home appraised for $989,000, just $100,000 more than the Austins got it appraised for before they started the work, despite $400,000 in renovations.
It was like, you know, it was a slap in the face.
The Austins immediately called their lender and pushed back. After a month of escalating their complaints, they were approved for a second appraisal. When the date came, they got creative.
We had a conversation with one of our white friends. She was like, no problem. I'll be Tanisha. I'll bring over some pictures of my family. She made our home look like it belonged to her.
And it worked.
So it appraised for $1.482.
Yeah.
Which was 50% more than what it appraised for by a couple weeks prior.
Almost $500,000 more.
The Austins were outraged and believe this is another ugly result of larger systemic issues.
There are implications of the ability to create generational wealth or pass things on if our house is appraised for 50% less than what is valued at.
We know discrimination is in nearly every aspect of the home buying process, and really we need to be addressing it as an industry.
Discrimination in the housing market comes in many forms. It has a long history in our country and in the Bay Area, leading to alarmingly low rates of Black Americans owning their own home. Black homeownership lags across the country, with less than half, only 44% of Black Americans owning their own home in 2020. Compare that to 74% for white Americans. Looking at the Golden State, just 34% of Black Californians own a home. In the Bay Area, those numbers are even lower. Just 33% of Black San Francisco residents own a home, compared to 61% of white San Franciscans. The numbers are more drastic in San Jose, with a Black homeownership rate of 31% and a white homeownership rate of 65%, more than double. Why are we seeing such a great disparity?
There's still problems in the housing industry of Black people being steered away from white neighborhoods, even though that is technically illegal, or Black people not having the same access to mortgages that white people have.
According to the National Association of Realtors, Black applicants are rejected for mortgage loans at rates 3 times higher than that of white applicants. Another factor suppressing Black homeownership.
African Americans have nearly double the amount of student loan debt than we see for white homebuyers. So that's just one of the many hurdles that African American homebuyers are really strapped with and hold back their buying power.
And the pandemic has made things worse. The representative from NAR stressed closing the homeownership gap is essential to closing the wealth gap in our country. To make that happen, equity in housing and access to affordable homes must be the central focus. The Austins agree.
We are aware that implicit bias exists in other systems, police, school. Why wouldn't they also exist in the housing market? And then what can we do to, fix that?
There could be help on the way in the form of 2 Biden administration proposals. The first would extend $15,000 in down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. The other, a $100 billion fund to update existing and create new affordable housing. Covering race, culture, and social justice, Julian Glover, ABC 7 News.
Okay, so we see that all this ties into policy, laws, regulations. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism doesn't have anything to do with not liking people, calling people racial epithets. Okay, this is not about, well, I was able to succeed. I'm Black, so therefore we don't need to change any laws. We don't need to address systemic racism because I was able to make it. So therefore the other 48 million should be able to make it. Okay, like what dumbass Larry Elder was saying the day at the reparations hearing. Okay, you get these Black talking heads that are, as Dr. Michael Eric Dyson said, white supremacy through ventriloquism. The words of white supremacy are coming through the body of somebody who is phenotypically Black, not Black in consciousness. Okay, and these are Republicans that bring dumbasses like this, or Burgess Owens, or Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker may have chronic traumatic encephalopathy. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. Okay, so, we may talk about that on tomorrow's show some. But these are the type of Negroes that they bring to a reparations conference. Okay, you bring in a pea shooter to a gunfight. You're bringing a pea shooter to a gunfight. Okay, so that was from ABC Channel 7 in Chicago. See, Negroes like that don't want to deal with structural inequities. Because if they call out white supremacy, then the checks will stop coming. They don't want to deal with structural inequities. They don't want to talk anything. They don't want to deal with anything like that. They want to make it. They want to deal with individual success stories. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. That nonsense. Okay. So they don't want to deal with the laws and policies that were put into place to maldistribute wealth, power, resources into the hands of Europeans. Because once they start doing that, their TV shows will be pulled off the air. They'll lose whatever contracts they have, and the checks will stop flowing. All right. So check out that article from face-to-faceafrica.com. Black couple's home was valued $500,000 higher after they had a white friend pose as the homeowner. And then also the original story from ABC Channel 7 in Chicago. Now, the home appraised for $148,000, or roughly $500,000 more than it appraised just weeks before. Okay. And let me see. Let's try to scroll down here in the article. Okay. So the couple said when they moved into the 1960s built home, they invested heavily in renovations, spending $400,000 in constructing new floors. The couple said the appraised older white woman used coded language, including Marin City is a distinct area. Marin City is a distinct area. In her appraisal, she valued the couple's home at $989,000, $100,000 more than its previous estimate before their $400,000 renovation, ABC Channel 7 reported. Now, when they had their friend, when they had their white friend pose to be Tanisha, okay, the plan worked, as the second appraiser valued the home at $1.4 million, $1,482,000, almost $500,000 more than the first appraisal. All right. So check this out from face-to-faceafrica.com, and then also from ABC Channel 7 in Chicago. Now, this ties into another story that I talked about in 2018. Also, keep in mind that 44% of African Americans are homeowners compared to 74% of white Americans. Okay. And they talked about student loan debt as well. Student loan debt plays a part in this. African Americans carry double the student loan debt that white Americans carry. Now, if we look at this article here from thegrio.com, and then I'm going to go to one from 2018 that deals with the segregation tax when it comes to African American home ownership. All this ties into policy, all this ties into laws. This is not about black people trying harder. Okay, this is not about that. Okay, people, when you have people who make especially Negroes who make these arguments, we just need to try harder. I made it. You should be able to make it. Other 49 million should be able to make it. Things like this. They don't want to deal with reality. They're being paid to lie to us. Let's just put it like that. They're being paid to lie to us. Let's see here. These are the type of Negroes Harriet Tubman would have left on the plantation. Let me put it to you like that. Let me to put it politely. For FCC regulated radio, to put it politely, these are the type of Negroes that Harriet Tubman would have left on the plantation. Black borrowers are struggling to repay student loan debt. Black borrowers are struggling to repay student loan debt. The Federal Reserve of New York reports that African American college students graduate with a higher loan bill than other racial groups. Now, this is from thegrio.com, November 6, 2019. Okay. November 6, 2019. According to the federal government, African American college students in cities such as Brooklyn and Chicago are drowning in student loan debt at higher numbers than white borrowers. According to research, economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, student loan debt weighs heavier on African Americans, and the reason may not be all that surprising. The fact that African Americans earn a relatively lower income than other racial groups is part of the problem, as they lack the money and resources to make payments, the Fed researchers said per CBS News. The data also noted that Black college students either graduate or drop out with a higher student loan bill, than other racial groups. Borrowing rates are somewhat higher in areas with a majority African American resident. Borrowing rates are somewhat higher in areas that have a majority African American residents, at 23%, compared with 17% in Hispanic majority zip codes and 14% in white majority zip codes, the New York Federal Reserve researchers wrote. These differences are likely explained in part by income disparities, as lower income students are more likely to need student loans to afford tuition. Okay? Income disparities, as lower income students are more likely to need student loans to afford tuition. Now, the Federal Reserve broke it down like this. Students living in predominantly urban or African American areas have an average student loan balance of $37,000 or higher. Meanwhile, white students on average have a balance of $34,000 or higher. When we see that the median household net worth of a white family is 10 times that of an African American family, in general, now I do understand they're poor white people. I do understand that. But in general, you're dealing with them coming from families that have more wealth, have more resources to help with first-time mortgages, okay, to be able to help with things like this. Now, the data also suggests that 18% of Black borrowers are twice as likely to default on student loans compared to 9% of white borrowers. All right. So in the clip from ABC News, from the ABC Channel 7, they talked about the student loan debt crisis and how it's crushing African Americans. And then that ties into the home ownership gap. Okay. And home ownership is one of the main ways that people historically in this country have been able to accumulate wealth. All right, now, if we go back to 2018, there was a study that came out from the Brookings Institute. And I talked about this here on the show. They talked about it on Velshi Rule on MSNBC, Ali Velshi and Stephanie Rule. I used to really like that show, Velshi and Rule. I guess they took it off because it came on 1 p.m. and it's hard to get ratings at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But they both had backgrounds in business. Ali Velshi and Stephanie Rule, they both have backgrounds in business, so I really appreciate that because I have a background in business as well. And they did a story that dealt with the segregation tax. Okay, the segregation tax, and I want to pull this up here. Now, all of this is tied together, and all of this is a legacy of slavery and Jim Crow segregation and racism. You can't separate this. You can't try to compartmentalize racism. You can't try to deal with racism on an individual level and say, because I was successful and I came from nothing and I got 3 degrees and worked my way through college and things like that, then racism is not a problem. You just have to try harder. That's idiotic. That's idiotic. If we look at this article here from Curbed.com, this deals with the study from the Brookings, a joint study from the Brookings Institute and Gallup. This is from November 27, 2018. We're going to go to that clip from MSNBC in just a second, Shakita. How a segregation tax is costing Black American homeowners $156 billion. How a segregation tax is costing Black American homeowners $156 billion. According to the study called The Devaluation of Assets in Black Neighborhoods, the case of residential property. Owner-occupied homes are undervalued by the real estate market across all majority Black neighborhoods and consistently sell or are appraised for lower prices, at an average of $48,000 per home. Nationwide, this amounts to $156 billion with a B in cumulative losses, or what the report dubs a segregation tax. Now, homes of a similar value with similar features are valued at 23% less in majority Black neighborhoods compared to those with very few or no Black residents. So it's a segregation tax. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Now, if you tie this to the study from the Citigroup Bank that I've talked about numerous times. So when we talk about repairing the damage and the legacy of slavery and racism, okay, what some people call reparations, you may call it restitution, You can call it whatever you want to get the job done. One could make the argument that you could get farther if you take the name reparations off of it. One could make that argument. I would agree. And I've talked about we need to shift the focus on present day structural inequities that are the legacy of slavery, then deal with the laws and policies that were put into place to bring about the structural inequities, and trace that back to slavery, racism, Jim Crow segregation, redlining, all of that. Deal with present day structural inequities that are because of racism, deal with the policies and laws that were put into place to bring them into existence, and then trace that back to slavery. As opposed to just making the focus on slavery, and then you get into arguments with people saying, "Oh, that chattel slavery ended 156 years ago. My ancestors never owned slaves; they just got here 2 generations ago." Instead of arguing with dumbass people that don't understand history, we can deal with present day structural inequities that are the legacy of slavery and trace it back to slavery. Some of those ignorant ass people are like Representative Jim Jordan from Ohio, the Donald Trump supporters. Matt Gaetz from Florida, Louis Gohmert from Texas, those people. It's people like that that invite a Burgess Owen, a Herschel Walker, a Larry Elder, Candace Owens. Those are the black talking heads they bring out to speak out against reparations or what have you. Okay, so racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. Citigroup fines. America could have been $16 trillion richer if not for inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between black and white Americans over the past 20 years, new research concludes. The study released this week by Citigroup, now this came out September 2020, is the latest. The study is the latest in a body of research that attempts to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism. This is the latest in a body of research that attempts to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism. Citigroup arrived at a $16 trillion figure after estimating that African American workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. The housing market lost $218 billion in sales because African American applicants could not get home loans. About $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the U.S. economy because African American entrepreneurs could not access bank loans. We're dealing with a legacy of Jim Crow segregation, legacy of slavery. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which is connected to politics. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and a writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. What's more, the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if these gaps and others were closed today, the study indicated. Now let's go to this clip here from MSNBC from the now defunct Veltian rule. This deals with the segregation tax and home ownership and how African American homes are valued at $156 billion less. Let's go to this clip.
All right, as we try and recover home ownership rates from the last recession, let's take a look at how race can severely restrict the upward economic mobility of African Americans. Since at least the 1940s, home ownership has been seen as a cornerstone of the American dream. It provides a sense of security, but it also builds wealth in the form of equity in your home. Now, through the mid-20th century, local governments and financial institutions used a practice known as redlining. They would literally draw red lines around black neighborhoods, leading to fewer municipal services, lower home values in those areas. But that was supposed to have ended. Well, a study from the Brookings Institution found that neighborhoods that are at least 50% black have an average of 23% lower home values. This is serious. This evaluation, by the way, just to give you a bit about how this is done, it's measured against comparable neighborhoods, looking at absolute home price differences
in neighborhoods with at least 50% black populations versus neighborhoods that have fewer than 1% black residents. It also looks at structural characteristics, the year the home was built, square footage, number of rooms. It's trying to make an apples-to-apples comparison. And it looks at neighborhood amenities, the physical landscape, the economic status, the quality of education, the types of stores available, grocery stores, things like that. When all of those are equalized, we're comparing apples to apples here. When it is equalized, homes in black neighborhoods are undervalued on average by $48,000. That is a loss of $156 billion in home value for millions of Americans, mostly African Americans, but also white Americans who live in majority black neighborhoods. Brookings looked at 113 different metropolitan areas that had at least one majority black neighborhood and compared home values in that majority black neighborhood to home values outside of the majority black neighborhood. All of the purple, these are all purple, all of these purple areas are areas of devaluation. You can see them all over the eastern part of the country where majority black neighborhoods have lower home values than other neighborhoods that are otherwise equal. The green, you can hardly see it. There's green here, there's green here, green here, green here, green here. There are a few areas of appreciation where majority black neighborhoods have higher home values than non-majority black neighborhoods. But the overwhelming majority of them are cases in which black neighborhoods have lower property values. The majority black neighborhoods in Florida's Sebastian Vero Beach area actually have higher values compared to other neighborhoods, but there are obviously far more areas that have devaluation. Perhaps the starkest area is Lynchburg, Virginia. Black majority neighborhoods there have home values 81% lower than in other neighborhoods. The absolute home value almost totally wipes out the value of the highest appreciation in the study, which is the Sebastian Vero Beach area. This is fascinating to dig into. Joining me now is the lead author on that study, Andre Perry of the Brookings Institution. Andre, you have put into a study something that we have known of, but is so influential because it's not just about your home value. It is going back decades to the home value that African Americans have tried to achieve so that they can pass on to other generations. So it is hurt generation after generation that African American neighborhoods have been undervalued. It means that African Americans can pass on less to their kids.
All right, we're going to pause it right there. We're out of time here. Those watching on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, keep watching. We're going to continue there. We'll continue with this clip. We'll play this clip some more tomorrow. Be sure to register for my online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register there for that. Also, if you'd like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Remember, right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Pastor Greg Davis. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. Okay, stand by, everybody. We're going to keep going. Let me cue this up here.
Hi, I'm Joel Wilson, President and CEO of JCW Computer Consulting, LLC, a technology implementation firm with over 20 years of satisfying customers. We offer a full spectrum of industry top-tier branded services. We are an authorized partner or reseller for Lenovo, Zoom, T-Mobile, Microsoft 365 and Surface tablets, Google Workspace, Acer, Asus, Samsung, PCmatic security software, and many more. Our online store features laptops, Chromebooks, computers, printers, accessories, and software. Businesses, take advantage of our free 1-hour Zoom tech consultation and know we offer top nationwide high-speed internet service providers, voice over IP, and cellular phone services. Home users, don't miss our current in-stock Chromebook inventory. Please visit us at jcwcc.com or call 215-879-6701.
We all know the cannabis industry is headed toward an uprise in the past decade. What happens when there is a brand that brings this uprise in a blow? The cannabis industry welcomes her uprise. Hustle her hemp. Delivering excellence with pride is her watchword. and how you choose to embrace it makes it a priority. From cultivating rich cannabis into exquisite and tastefully finished CBD products to delivery, Hustle Her Hemp leaves no stone unturned. Hustle Her Hemp's mission is to empower women of color by building business and creating legacies, uniting beauty, health, and business. We are a pure definition of how we want the CBD industry to become in the future. While we are redefining innovation, we bring the same energy to improving the quality of life. Hustle Her Hemp is the new uprise.
Let me cue this clip up here. Now, this is from MSNBC. This is from November 28th, 2018. This clip. November 28th, 2018. This is from Velshi Rule. This is from Velshi Rule. Hold on. Okay. And this is on YouTube also. You can check out this clip. Let's cue this up. Now, this ties into also the racial wage gap as well. This ties into the racial wage gap also. There's a article from Black Enterprise that I've talked about a number of times, and it deals with how Black women make $1 million less over their working lifetime, over about a 40-year period of time. Okay, let me show you this. All of this is connected together. All of this is connected together. You're dealing with the legacy of racism. You're dealing with the legacy of slavery. And when you have these people that want to discount this, and they don't want to deal with any of these facts, they just want to deal with personal success stories. And racism is a group-to-group relationship. Racism is not an individual-to-individual relationship. Your personal success stories don't have anything to do with the conditions of African Americans. Okay? Read this article here. I've talked about it a number of times in my lectures and broadcasts. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. Now, this plays a big part in the racial wealth gap. Okay, an African American woman will lose out on $946,000 over a 40-year career if she continues to make 61 cents on the dollar that the average white man earns due to the wage gap analysis by the National Women's Law Center shows. The average African American woman will lose out on $946,120, okay, over a 40-year working career if African American women continue to make 61 cents on the dollar that the average white male makes. Assuming she and her white non-Hispanic male counterpart, begin work at age 20. Assuming that she and her non-Hispanic white male counterpart begin work at age 20, an African American woman would have to work until she is 86 years old to catch up to what a white non-Hispanic man has been paid by age 60. She would have to work to age 86 to make the same amount of money that the average white non-Hispanic man was paid by age 60. Okay, so the National Women's Law Center found that African American women face even larger pay disparity in certain states. In the state of Louisiana, African American women are paid on average 47 cents for every dollar their white non-Hispanic male counterpart makes. 47 cents. Now, there are 5 states where African American women make will lose $1 million or more in their in their working lifetime. There are 5 states. And even at the PhD level, advanced education among Black women has not been shown to lower the wage gap. In fact, the gap is largest for the most educated African American women. Doctorate degree holders who are African American women tend to make 60% of what their white male counterparts make. Doctorate degree holders, so they usually have student loan debt. Doctorate degree holders who are African American women tend to make 60% of what their white male counterparts make. Then it goes on to talk about student loan debt. Okay, so check this out. African Americans are more likely to have student loan debt, more likely to have student loan debt, but they're making, when it comes to African American women, either 61 or 67% on the dollar that the average white male makes, depending upon which year. That deals with Black women's equal pay day, which usually falls in August. Black women's equal pay day, you've heard me talk about that before. It takes the average African American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white man makes in 12 months. Go research Black women's equal pay day. The average African American woman has to work till sometime in August the next year to make the same amount of money that the average white male made in 12 months of the previous year. Okay, that's dealing with Black women's equal pay day. The average African American man makes somewhere, I guess, about 79, 80% on the dollar that the average white male makes. All right. So this ties into, you combine that with the student loan debt, and then we see these inequities play into disparities when it comes to home ownership, then home values, and then we see this show up in the wealth gap. All of this is connected. Okay, all of this is connected. All right, so let's continue here. So African American women have the highest student loan debt of any racial or ethnic group. For an undergraduate degree, the average African American woman carries nearly $30,400 in debt compared to $19,500 for white men. Nearly $30,400 in debt. The wage gap lessens Black women's ability to pay off educational debt, creating an additional barrier to saving money that could be used to buy a home, start a business, or be used for emergencies. This is all connected. Same thing applies to African American men. Okay, there's less money, so you have more money in student loan debt, but you're making less making less cents on the dollar. Okay, but you have more student loan debt, which makes it harder to accumulate wealth and to buy a home. All right, so check out this article here from blackenterprise.com. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. Okay, now let's go back to the clip from MSNBC that deals with the segregation tax and how the segregation tax is costing African American homeowners $156 billion in lost home value. Okay, let's go back to this clip here.
Of the Brookings Institution. Andre, you have put into a study something that we have known of, but is so influential because it's not just about your home value. It is going back decades to the home value that African Americans have tried to achieve so that they can pass on to other generations. So it is hurt generation after generation that African American neighborhoods have been undervalued. It means that African Americans can pass on less to their kids.
Absolutely. The $156 billion that my colleagues Jonathan Rothwell at Gallup and David Harshbarger also at Brookings, the $156 billion we found in cumulative losses is really the amount of money that we use to uplift our social status.
Right.
So it's the money that should go to starting a business, going to college, improving your home, or even moving to a better neighborhood.
Right.
That's what we use the equity for. But essentially, racism is robbing people, black people, of that ability to uplift themselves.
Paired with your report is some interesting numbers from the National Bureau of Economic Research that 54% of the wealth owned by black families is in home ownership. So it is a massive source of what wealth there is in black households. So this is so critically important because it's not that home ownership is just one piece of the wealth of African Americans. It's the majority of it.
Yeah, and we got to remember that black folk believe in the American dream, and we strive for the American dream. Also in the report, we found that black communities, majority black communities, hold about $600 billion worth of housing assets. There is power and strength in black communities. We are doing what we are expected to do. But the devaluation is taking away more opportunities to advance ourselves. The narrative has been that black folk are the problem for declining neighborhoods, that black women's marital status, that black boys who don't pull up their pants are the reasons why black communities are not moving up. But our research clearly finds that the devaluation, the perception of a negative value is robbing black residents opportunities for growth.
And it's a vicious cycle. I spend a lot of my time in Philadelphia, and your study found that Philadelphia, close to the average of home devaluation, had a lower number of libraries in some of those areas, lower proficiency rate for public school kids. Game this out. If the value of the home is lower, it then creates a circle in which certain institutions don't get settled in there, certain retailers don't come in, certain grocery stores don't come in.
Yeah, you devalue a neighborhood. There's divestment. People leave the neighborhood. There's fewer municipal expenditures in the neighborhood. School quality goes down because there's just not a lot of revenue in the neighborhood. It's a vicious cycle. It's not black folks' fault. These are great assets. They should be worth more, 23% more. And that money should be used for those community benefits.
So I want to show you some more research from the National Bureau of Economic Research that shows wealth held by white Americans at the top versus wealth held by black Americans. Now, if you look around the middle to the right of that screen, you see that during the Great Recession, wealth falters. In both cases, it falters by a lot more because white Americans had a lot more wealth to lose, and then it comes up. Whereas black wealth, again, if it's dependent on things like property, it didn't drop as much. It didn't come up by as much either.
Yeah, and this is the problem. Wealth gives you the ability to withstand the shocks that inevitably will come. You lose a job, you get sick, your son or daughter gets married. You typically leverage your equity to fill those gaps. The inability for blacks to gain wealth hurts our ability to deal with the shocks that will come. And so what I have been advocating for is for us to clearly have policies that help us deal with the racism that's baked into real estate agents, appraisals, and lending practices. But I'm also saying to the black community, hey, this report that you can get at brookings.edu, you can actually see your price and you can what your home should be worth, and you can demand value by animating the activity in your community and say, hey, we're worth more, we deserve more, we can invest more in our black communities.
Andre, great conversation, great research. Thank you for joining me. Andre Perry is with the Brookings Institution. Hey.
All right. So that's from MSNBC from November 28th, 2018. We'll post a link here. That's dealing with, name of that clip is Homes Owned by Black Americans Are Undervalued by Billions of Dollars. And that's on YouTube. Homes owned by Black Americans are undervalued by billions of dollars. That's from November 28th, 2018, MSNBC. That's Velshi rule. So that is connected, what we just heard. And in the clip from the couple, in California from ABC Channel 7, whose home was undervalued by hundreds of thousands of dollars, undervalued by about $500,000. In that clip, it talked about the student loan. It talked about student loan debt. Okay, and I'm going to play that clip again as well. Okay, all of this is connected, and this ties into history. Okay, see, unfortunately, a lot of people who speak out against reparations and things like this are ignorant of history. And some people who are advocating for reparations are ignorant of history, to just be honest, because Americans are woefully ignorant of history. Just to be honest, many of them mean well, but just don't understand history and law. And others are just in it for themselves and ain't just what they're talking about is not going to lead to anything. They're confusing activity with productivity, some of them. Because some of the arguments they're making are not legal arguments, which is problematic. Look at this right here. You've heard me talk about it before. This is one of the 45 executive orders that Joe Biden did. This is from, okay, which one is this? I have 3 executive orders. Which one is this I'm looking at? This is one of them. January 26, 2021, memorandum on redressing our nation's and the federal government's history of discriminatory housing practices and policies. Who's read this executive order? You've heard me talk about it before. You can read all executive orders from a president at whitehouse.gov, January 26, 2021. Some of this we're going to skip over. I just want to get to the main crux of it. Background of diverse and inclusive communities, strengthen our democracy. Okay, federal, state, during the 20th century, federal, state, and local governments systematically implemented racially discriminatory housing policies that contributed to segregated neighborhoods and inhibited equal opportunity and the chance to build wealth for Black, Latino, Asian American, and Pacific Islander and Native American families and other underserved communities. Ongoing legacies of residential segregation and discrimination remain ever present in our society. These include a racial gap in home ownership, persistent undervaluation of properties owned by families of color, disproportionate burden of pollution, and exposure to the impacts of climate change in communities of color. So this then ties into environmental racism. When you deal with climate change and you deal with African American communities having a greater exposure to pollution, a greater exposure to lead in the water, like Flint, Michigan, and a greater exposure to the impacts of climate change and systemic barriers to safe and accessible and affordable housing. Okay, people of color, immigrants, underserved populations, everything. All right. All this is tied together. Now, throughout much of the 20th century, the federal government systematically supported discrimination and exclusion in housing and mortgage lending, while many of the federal government's housing policies and programs expanded home ownership across the country. Many knowingly excluded Black people and other persons of color and promoted and reinforced housing segregation. Federal policies contributed to mortgage redlining and lending discrimination. All right, now, then they talk about the Interstate Highway Act, the 1952-56, that drove about 41,000 miles of U.S. interstate highways, and they ran through about 1,600 African-American communities, wiping out our businesses, wiping out our homes, like they ran through Black Bottom and Paradise Valley here in Detroit. And I-375 runs through what was known as Black Bottom, okay, where you had a number of African-American homes, and then Paradise Valley was like the business entertainment district. There's about 300 businesses there. So the creation of the interstate highway system, funded and constructed by the federal government and state governments in the 20th century, disproportionately burdened many historically Black and low-income neighborhoods in many American cities. Many urban interstate highways were deliberately built to pass through Black neighborhoods, often requiring the destruction of housing and other local institutions. Who's read this executive order? This came out January 26th. You heard me talk about it before. I've talked about this a number of times on the show. Who's actually read this? Many urban interstate highways were deliberately built to pass through black neighborhoods, often requiring the destruction of housing and other local institutions. To this day, many black neighborhoods are disconnected from access to high quality housing, jobs, public transit, and other resources. So this is the result. This ain't the result of people calling people the N-word. This is not the result of people not liking people. This is the result of laws and policies put into place. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Read the entire executive order, okay? Well, I'll post a link here. I don't have time to get through all of it because we're already over time as it is. But read the entire executive order and read the other 44 that Biden has done. Now that ties into and I'm going to go to the study from Citigroup Bank that deals with how the U.S. has lost $16 trillion over a 20-year period of time from 2000 to 2020 as a result of racism. Okay. So if you look at this executive order here from January 20th, 2021. January 20th, 2021. So if January 20th sounds familiar, that was the day of the inauguration. Joe Biden did 10 executive orders that day. Okay. Very few people talk about this. They talk, but a lot of them are full of it. So they don't talk about this stuff. This is one of them. This is one of the first executive orders he did day one. Executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. So one of the most important things here in this executive order is this right here. By advancing equity across the federal government, let me make sure we have this on. Okay, yeah, we have this on the screen share. By advancing equity across the federal government, we can create opportunities for the improvement of communities that have been historically underserved, which benefits everyone. Because the study from Citigroup that deals with how the U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion over 20 years, what that study shows is how racism is hurting everybody. Even though African Americans get the brunt of it, it's showing how racism hurts everybody. And if you correct these structural inequities, how it'll benefit everybody, even though we get the most of the benefit. It's good for America to address these racial inequities. So if you look at this, by advancing equity across the federal government, we can create opportunities for the improvement of communities that have been historically underserved, which benefits everyone. For example, an analysis shows that closing racial gaps in wages, housing, credit, lending opportunities, and access to higher education would amount to an additional $5 trillion, an additional $5 trillion in gross domestic product in the American economy over the next 5 years. That comes directly from the study from Citigroup. That's where that comes from in Biden's executive order. That directly comes from the study from Citigroup. The federal government, the federal government's goal in advancing equity is to provide everyone with the opportunity to reach their full potential. Consistent with these aims, each agency must assess whether and to what extent its programs and policies perpetuate systemic barriers to opportunities and benefits for people of color and other underserved groups. Okay, so read the entire executive order. That's from day one. That's from January 20th, 2021. January 20th, 2021. Executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. All right. Okay, so read that one. Now, that is connected to where we're going to go next. Where do I want to go? Okay. when we look at redlining, read this article here from blackpast.org, blackpast.org, dealing with redlining. Blackpast.org has about 6,000 articles dealing with African American history and African history. Redlining, 1937. Redlining refers to a discriminatory pattern of disinvestment and obstructive lending practices that act as an impediment to home ownership among African Americans and other people of color. Banks used the concept to deny loans to homeowners and would-be homeowners who lived in these neighborhoods. This in turn resulted in neighborhood economic decline and the withholding of services or their provision at an exceptionally high cost. The origin of the term redlining stems from the policies developed by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, created in 1933 by the President Franklin Roosevelt administration to reduce home foreclosures during the Great Depression, and then institutionalized by the 1937 U.S. Housing Act, which established the Federal Housing Association. So we're talking about government policies. We're talking about policies from the federal government that help create these structural inequities. Now, federal housing agencies, including the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Federal Housing Association, determined whether areas were deemed unfit for investment by banks, insurance companies, savings and loan associations, and other financial service companies. The areas were physically demarcated with red shading on a map. In contrast, zones which were to receive preferential lending status were marked in green shading, and intermediate areas in blue shading. Often these decisions were arbitrarily based on areas' racial composition rather than income levels. Oftentimes these decisions were arbitrarily based on the area's racial composition rather than income levels. While the practice was almost universal before 1968, the Civil Rights Act passed that year, which was the Fair Housing Act of 68, which is another Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 passed that year, theoretically outlawed redlining. Nonetheless, its impact was felt after that date. In a series of Pulitzer Prize-winning articles which appeared in 1988 under the title "The Color of Money," Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporter Bill Dedman described how Atlanta, Georgia banks still discriminated by the racial designation of neighborhoods. His article illustrated how these banks were nearly twice as likely to lend to homeowners and prospective home buyers in low-income white neighborhoods as in affluent black areas. His article illustrated how these banks were nearly twice as likely to lend to homeowners and prospective home buyers in low-income white neighborhoods as opposed to affluent African-American neighborhoods. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. As a consequence of redlining, neighborhoods that local banks deemed unfit for investment were left underdeveloped or in disrepair, especially after the deindustrialization of the inner city, which begins really in like the late 1950s, goes into 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the deindustrialization of the inner city and taking out factories and industries out of the inner city and putting them out in the suburbs, okay? Because you have homes being built in the suburbs that go back to after World War II. This is why you have to understand the chronology of history. The baby boomer generation, World War II, the GI Bill, 1944, that gives the GIs, basically white men, low interest loans to build homes, start businesses, go to college. African American GIs are largely discriminated against when we try to take advantage of the benefits that we earned and our taxpayer dollars pay for. Okay. See, this is a deep history here. All this deals with laws and policies. This is a deep history. This don't have nothing to do with individual success stories. This doesn't have anything to do with, oh, black people just need to try harder, as some idiotic black talking heads will have you believe, because that's what they get paid to tell you. Now, if we look at this study here from this is an article from Newsweek.com. Okay. 40% of whites think black people just need to try harder to be equally successful. This is what happens when people don't understand history. All of this is connected. This is from November 4th, 2018. Now, this was the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. Okay, or 60th anniversary. Yeah, 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. April 4th, 2018. 40% of whites think black people just need to try harder. You're not trying hard enough. If you just try harder, racism will go away. 40% of white Americans think African Americans would be just as well off as white people if they just worked harder. According to a new poll from YouGov, YouGov asked a number of questions on what it called racial resentment. You don't have to worry about racism and slavery and all that. All you just have to do is just try harder. Just get up earlier. Just work 3 times as hard. If you just try harder, you'll be more successful. One of what YouGov asked a number of questions on what it called racial resentment, one of which centered the respondent, centered on whether the respondent agreed with the statement. It's really a matter of some people not trying hard enough. If blacks would only try harder, they could be just as well off as white people. When you go study the laws and history of this country, white people didn't become wealthy because they try harder. It wasn't because they tried harder, it's because the laws and policies were in their favor. Overall, 35% of respondents agreed, 16% strongly, 19% somewhat with that statement, 28% neither agreed nor disagreed. 40% of white respondents agreed, 19% strongly, 21% somewhat, that black people just needed to try harder to be equal, while just 18% of black respondents said the same. Okay, and Larry Elder and Herschel Walker and Burgess Owens, they were probably part of that 18%. So read this full article here from Newsweek.com. 40% of whites think black people just need to try harder. You're not trying hard enough. Okay, forget structural inequities, forget racism and all that stuff. Forget that African American woman makes 61 cents on the dollar that the average white man makes, and forget the fact that you have to work to age 86, black women, to make the same amount of money that the average white man makes by age 60. Forget all that. If you just try harder, you'll be just as successful. Forget the fact that African American women with PhDs, with doctorate degrees, make 60% of what the average white man makes with a PhD or doctorate degree. Forget all that stuff. You just have to try harder. Okay. All right. Whatever. All right. Okay. So I want to go to this one here. This is from CBS News. Economist who says racism cost the U.S. $16 trillion explains the math. All right. Now, this was an African-American economist, Dana Peterson. Let's give this sister her props. all this black girl magic. So she's the one who authored the study, or was the lead economist on the study from Citigroup. And she has since left Citigroup. Dana Peterson is a chief economist for the Conference Board and formerly global economist for Citigroup. Okay. So check out this article, Economist who says racism cost the U.S. $16 trillion explains the math. Now, this is from November 3rd, 2020. Okay. This is a follow-up to that study. Systemic racism has kept the U.S. from reaching its full economic potential. Systemic racism, once again, hurts everybody. Systemic racism has kept the U.S. from reaching its full economic potential, according to a growing body of research. Okay. A recent Citigroup study estimated that financial, educational, and other inequities between black and white Americans cost the U.S. a staggering $16 trillion. CBS Money Watch spoke with Dana Peterson, formerly global economist at Citigroup, now chief economist for the Conference Board, and the lead researcher behind the study. And she talked about the findings. All right. So I want to go to this clip here. Just a second. I want to go to this interview. Where is it? Okay, here we go. All right, let's get past this ad. Okay, so once again, all of this is connected. The history, the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, the laws, the policies put in place, all of this is connected. This don't have nothing to do with trying harder or individual success stories. This has to do with a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Okay, let's cue this up here.
Report says 16.
All right, here we go.
The report says 16 trillion. Can you sort of break that down into its parts? What are the different sort of buckets or arenas that make up the 16 trillion?
Sure. The 16 trillion is a sum of estimated economic losses from homeownership, education, income, and business investment gaps between black and white households and firms. The largest share of the gap is $13 trillion less in business revenues. Accompanying that figure are potentially 6 million fewer jobs created per year. The next largest share is 2.7 trillion in wages not earned by black workers. The remaining shares are from foregone income due to the education gap, plus equity not accrued and spending not affected from the homeownership gap. Again, folding in racial wealth gaps would produce an even more outsized figure than 16 trillion.
So let's just take the 16 trillion that we have in front of us. How do we start to chip away at that? How do we get that number lower? Is there any plan for that under your thoughts?
Well, sure. It's best to take a holistic approach, as racial gaps appear to link to each other in a complex matrix. So housing segregation and homeownership gaps contribute to education gaps, which contribute to wage and income gaps, which contribute to wealth gaps, which affect homeownership and investment, which affect education gaps and back to wages, etc. As you can see, it becomes quite circular. So targeting each of these gaps from multiple fronts can erode racial economic inequality. Positive interventions along the continuum of lifetime activities, from early education to higher education and training, to employment, to access to credit to purchase homes, to access to capital to start businesses, to build wealth for retirement, are all required to help close these racial economic gaps.
When you all saw the 16 trillion, what was your reaction? Because my reaction was like, that's huge. What did you all think when you finally settled on that number?
Well, the figure looked about right. Indeed, it may be a lower bound of estimates on economic loss, as we did not try to quantify the racial wealth gap. Adding on the opportunity loss in wealth would generate an even larger and more sobering figure. The figure is also consistent with prior work from other researchers on racial gaps. and is also comparable in terms of magnitude to figures computed from the existing research on closing gender labor force gaps.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so once again, so check out the two articles. Check out this one here, for the first one from CBS News. And once again, that was economist Dana Peterson that you heard being questioned about the study and explaining it. Okay, so check out this first one. This is from September 23rd, 2020. Racism has cost the U.S. 16 trillion Citigroup fines. Okay. Now, when we talk about restitution or reparations, repairing the damage of racism, repairing the damage of slavery and the legacy of racism, Jim Crow, segregation, things like this, and how that history shows up in these structural inequities today, this is the type of ammunition we need to come with. This is the type of research and data we need to come with, because the dumbasses like Larry Elder and Simple Simon Herschel Walker and Burgess Owen, they're not going to deal with none of this stuff. In Herschel Walker, why the hell they have him up there? A mind is a terrible thing to waste. Herschel Walker could be the poster boy of a mind is a terrible thing to waste. This is the type of research, all this stuff I've been going over, the Brookings Institute, $156 billion in devaluation of African American homes, all this research. This is what we have to deal with. This is type of information that we have to deal with when we talk about repairing the damage in the legacy of slavery. And the majority of the focus should be if we want to get something accomplished and not just keep having panel discussions and debates and arguments. If we want to actually get something accomplished, the majority of the focus should be on present day structural inequities and how they show up, and then deal with the laws and policies that were put into place to bring about those structural inequities, like the redlining, the Federal Housing Administration, the Fair Housing Association, the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 56, all the stuff I've been laying out. All this deals with laws and policies. This don't deal with feelings. This doesn't deal with individual stories where I was able to make it. I got 4 degrees and I'm successful. Therefore, the other 49 million black people should be able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps because racism didn't hold me back. This don't have nothing to do with that. So we have to approach this scientifically. Okay, now, Ms. Respect said Herschel Walker was barely coherent. He very well could have CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is a brain degeneration that's prevalent in football players. Burgess Owens could probably have it also, which would explain a lot. Okay, now we did okay, let's show the sister again. Give her props. This is economist Dana Peterson. This is the other article to check out. Now notice this whole conversation, I ain't saying nothing about we work for free for 246 years. I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with the evidence. I'm dealing with the science. I ain't talking about we work for free and all this stuff. Because when you actually, if you ever study the history of slavery, and I encourage people to do that if you're going to talk about reparations, repairing the damage of slavery. If you ever study the history of slavery, we know it was morally wrong, but it was legal in this country to enslave African people and not pay them. It was legal. So arguing we didn't get paid when it was legal not to pay us is not as convincing of an argument than to deal with the laws and policies that were put into place to create these structural inequities and showing how racism negatively impacts everybody. And it's a legacy of slavery. If you want to get something accomplished, if you want to change these conditions, if you want to correct this. And then that ties into, and not to make this really long, but I talked about this couple of nights ago, I think, dealing with legal arguments for legal arguments for reparations, restitution, dealing with Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which led to the international transatlantic slave trade being abolished. The U.S. Congress passed that law March 2nd, 1807. If you go to history.gov, the official website of the History Channel, they have an article there dealing with that. International transatlantic slave trade abolished March 2nd, 1807. That goes into effect January 1st, 1808. That's stipulated by Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. They're debating at the Philadelphia Convention, where they're drafting the U.S. Constitution and voting on it. They're debating whether or not to abolish the international transatlantic slave trade, which means the importation of Africans into this country to enslave them. All the colonies agreed to abolish it except for South Carolina. So they put a 20-year clause in the U.S. Constitution that stated the earliest the international transatlantic slave trade could be abolished would be 1808. That's why that law passed and went into effect. So all the Africans that were brought in this country from January 1st, 1808 to June of 1860 with the Clotilda in Alabama, that's the last known slave ship that we know about, all of that was illegal based upon federal law. When you go study this history, they had U.S. ships out, like for the Navy and different things like this, looking for slave ships to capture them because it was illegal. All that's illegal. So instead of focusing on restitution for what was done that was illegal based upon federal law, we're putting the focus on restitution for what was done that was legal. When you go to lawmakers, you go and argue law. You don't go argue morality. If you want to argue morality, go to church. When you go to lawmakers write laws. 3 branches of government: judicial, legislative, and executive. Legislative is the House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. When you go to talk to lawmakers, you go and argue law. You can talk about history as it relates to law, but you go argue law. Lawmakers write laws. When laws get passed and they get challenged, where do they get challenged? They get challenged in the judicial branch of government, which are the courts. What's the foundation of the challenge? That is unconstitutional. If reparations pass, and ain't going to be anytime soon, I'm telling you right now, it's not. If reparations pass and we somehow get some type of reparations, whatever form it's in, you think it's not going to be challenged in court? And Trump has nominated about almost 1/3 of the federal judges. You think it's not going to be challenged in court, in the judicial branch of government? And the judicial branch of government interprets the laws written and passed by the legislative branch of government? And the judicial branch can strike down laws written by the legislative branch? You think it's not going to be challenged in court? Well, if you already know it's going to be challenged in court, and the foundation of the challenge is that it's unconstitutional, why wouldn't you root your argument for restitution or reparations in the U.S. Constitution? If you actually want to get something accomplished. If they, under the Trump administration, they tried to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act. And Trump's Attorney General, William Barr, was part of this lawsuit, the DOJ, and the case went before the U.S. Supreme Court to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act that's saving millions of white people's lives. If they're going to court to try to overturn the Affordable Health Care Act and it's saving millions of white people's lives, and one of the arguments they're making is that it's unconstitutional. If reparations somehow passes, you think they're not going to try to overturn that in the courts? The judicial branch of government interprets the laws passed by the legislative branch of government, and the judicial branch can strike down laws. When they go to court, they argue it's unconstitutional. Well, if you know that that's going to happen, why wouldn't you root your argument in the U.S. Constitution as opposed to morality? We know it was unjust and all that. I totally understand that. It was cruel and all, yeah, we understand that. But when you go to lawmakers, you don't go arguing morality. You go arguing law. if you want to accomplish something. Okay. So, read the article from Black Agenda Report written by Reggie Marbury and Dr. Jahi Issa. I interviewed them for 4 hours. We did a 2-part series, 2 interviews back in 2017, 2018. And some of this information I knew, but they had research that went even deeper into this. And it's called, the name of the article is, I think it's called Reparations is Dead. Here's how to revive it. Something like that. Okay. Here it is. Reparations is Dead, How to Resurrect It. Excellent article. Dr. Jahi Issa and Brother Reggie Marbury. Brother Reggie Marbury does a lot of research. I first met Brother Reggie Marbury at an ASCAC conference back in, what was it? I can't remember, 2014, 2015. Reggie Marbury used to take care of Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen a lot. And he was the one that introduced me to Dr. Ben, actually, at the ASCAC conference. We were at Howard University. Dr. David Imhotep came to that lecture. He came to that conference. Dr. David Imhotep was there. Dr. Greg Carr was there, who you see on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Dr. Leonard Jeffries was there, one of my teachers. He was there. I can't remember. And I think Professor James Small came to that one also, because I interviewed Professor James Small at that conference also. Okay. And it was Dr. Ben and Dr. Richard King, because I took a picture with both of them, Dr. Ben and Dr. Richard King, and both of them are ancestors now. Okay. So read this article here from, I'm going to show you this and read it. And see, they're dealing with legal arguments. They're not dealing with feelings and emotions. They're dealing with legal arguments for reparations. This is something that most people don't want to deal with. All right. And they deal with court cases where white men were arrested and prosecuted for bringing African slaves into the country. Reparations is Dead, How to Resurrect It. Dr. Jahi Issa and Reggie Marbury. Between 15 and 20 million Africans were brought to the Americas alive against their will. Okay. So it goes through and breaks all this stuff down. All right. So check this out. And this deals with legal arguments. And then that also ties into the U.S. Supreme Court case of the Amistad. U.S. Supreme Court case of the Amistad slave ship of 1841. And so how many of you all saw the movie Amistad? About Joseph Q. Jaman Hansu portraying Joseph Q. And the ship was, the Africans were captured in 1839. And there's a slave revolt on the ship. They killed a lot of the crew. And they forced the remaining crew, the captain and somebody else, to take them back to Africa. But the crew ends up steering them into U.S. waters. The ship is captured because it's illegal for that ship to come into U.S. waters, because it's 1841. This is after the international transatlantic slave trade has been abolished. So they go to court. They end up going to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they win their freedom in the U.S. Supreme Court. And one of the grounds for them winning their freedom was that it was illegal for that ship to come into the U.S. in the first place, because the international transatlantic slave trade had been outlawed. Okay, that's a legal precedence. If you go to archives.gov, which is the official website of the National Archives, and search for Amistad, they have some of the original court documents there, and they deal with this court case. So a lot of people saw the movie Amistad, and they remember "Give us free, give us free," and they remember those Africans got their freedom, but they don't know why they got their freedom. They got their freedom because it was illegal for that ship to come into the U.S. in the first place. 1, 2, when they were captured, it violated all of the existing treaties between European nations also, because European nations had outlawed the international transatlantic slave trade as well. Now, some are going to violate it, and Africans kept being brought into this country, violation of federal law. But this is understanding legal arguments. This book here is probably one of the best books dealing with the Amistad, Mutiny on the Amistad, by Howard Jones, the events that inspired the major motion picture. Because I did a whole presentation on the Amistad. I'm going to have to re-air that. I'm going to go through and edit that and re-air that, because I did a whole presentation dealing with the Amistad slave ship and how this ties into law. And this deals with part of a legal argument for reparations, restitution, repairing the damage. Personally, I think we need to get away from the term reparations, because automatically it's a trigger word. Automatically it brings up opposition. People didn't know slavery was a long time ago. My ancestors didn't own slaves. They just got here last generation or 2 generations ago. What have all this stuff? It cuts down on argument. It cuts down on the argument. You can't even make your case because people are already in opposition and don't want to hear about slavery, all this stuff. The goal is to get something accomplished, not to win arguments or get YouTube views. The goal is to actually get something accomplished, get resources, get restitution. So this is why I ask people, do you actually want to get reparations or just keep fighting for reparations? Do you actually want to get reparations? Or do you just want to keep fighting for reparations? Because those are 2 different things. Okay, let that sink in. Somebody emailed me, is it too late to register for the 2 classes? No, it's an 8-week course. Oh, you missed the 2 classes. Okay. No, it's not too late. You can still register. We do the online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. It's not too late to register, number 1. Number 2, we do the classes live, but they're all recorded. There's too much damn work to do and not record this stuff. Seriously, this is a lot of work. Okay? So as soon as you register, you can watch class 1, class 2. You can watch the class we did February 16th, and it had Sister Nubia Warford do a very wonderful presentation dealing with the origins of ancient Kush and African queens of antiquity, things like this. And there's bonus content there, and I'm adding more bonus content. And then you'll be ready for our class Tuesday, February 23rd. Okay, so we posted a link here. You can still register for it. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, is at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We do 1,000 years of history. We deal with ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, the Nile Valley region of Africa, what led to the transatlantic slave trade happening. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. Okay. And you can watch from around the world. It's PG-13. You can use this for children as well. I say 13 and up. I'm not vulgar. I'm not cursing and things like this. I ain't going crazy. But, we have to talk about slavery, so I have to deal with some unpleasant things also. But there's a lot of good information, things that are inspiring as well. So 12, 13 years old. So when you scroll down, you see the information about our radio show. You see the picture of me there in the studio now, 10 a.m. Superstation, where I would normally be if it wasn't for COVID-19. Normally I'm broadcasting from the radio station. So here I'm broadcasting from my own studio. Click here to read articles that I've written. There's information here about the class. Okay. And 8-week online course. Click right here to register. We have a flyer here. Okay. Click right here, register here. Takes you to the next page. Okay, online course, click right here to enroll. As soon as you enroll, you can start watching the content. All right. So it's as easy as that. All right. And then we also have the 15 DVD. So we also have the information here because I'm on the panel discussion for Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, February 24th. That's a free event to attend. It's a virtual Black History Month celebration. You see me right there with a suit on. So 7 p.m. Wednesday, February 24th. Click right here to register here. It's on Zoom, so you're welcome to attend that. It's free. They are asking for donations, so please support them. And they have a good poetry event coming up in March, and they're asking for donations for that. So please support them for that also. And then here we have the Michael Imhotep 15 DVD bundle pack. It's 15 of my lectures dealing with history, African American history. One really deep one dealing with the history of African American History Month. Click here for order here. Takes you right here, and that's on sale $100, a 15 DVD bundle pack, and it shows you all the DVDs. And then we have this on digital download as well. Okay, so check that out. But no, it's not too late to register. So you can register right now. As soon as we end this show, you can start watching the content. All right. So this is what I'm doing for African American History Month. Our next class Tuesday, February 23rd. Our special guest speaker is going to be Dr. David Imhotep, author of the book. First Americans were Africans, documented evidence. You don't want to miss that one. That's going to be good. It's going to be a good class. All right. Okay. So we did that. I want to make sure I got all this because I laid this out. Okay. So the story about Senator Cory Booker and Reverend Raphael Warnock, we'll deal with that tomorrow because we're out of time here. We'll deal with that tomorrow. It's so much. I want to make sure we get this because all of this is connected. All of this is connected. Okay. I'm going to play this clip from ABC Channel 7 again because we're going to end where we started. And this deals with the African American couple in California. And see, this is history in the headlines. All of this is connected. Okay. So the story from Senator Cory Booker, Reverend Raphael Warnock introduced bills to help minority farmers. Now, I've talked about this before. This is the Justice for Black Farmers Act. Okay. Which then ties into history also. History and laws and African American farmers being discriminated against. Okay, so let me pull this up. You can read this, and we'll discuss this on tomorrow's show. This is from blackenterprise.com. Yeah, this is an article from Black Enterprise on February 12th. And this particular article I wanted to talk about sooner, but we didn't get a chance to. It's been so busy, we didn't get a chance to talk about it. So you see all this history is showing up in headlines. Yesterday's show, we talked about Representative Benny Thompson suing Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, the Proud Boys, and the Oath Keepers using the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act, which is one of the 4 force acts that were passed from about 1870 to 1875 during Reconstruction. All this deals with history. Okay, so this article here, God damn, they got so many damn ads up here. Oh, come on, man, come on. Man. I know they got to make money, but come on now. Check out this article here, because we talked about the Justice for Black Farmers Act in the past 2 or 3 weeks. Senator Cory Booker, Reverend Raphael Warnock introduced bills to help minority farmers. February 12, 2021. Cory Booker, Reverend Raphael Warnock introduced separate bills to help Black farmers by closing equity gaps and improving diversity within food and agricultural policy and politics. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. All of this turns on the vote. All of this, being able to get these policies in act, being able to get them written, being able to get them passed and put into practice, all this turns on the vote, which is why Republicans work so hard to suppress the African American vote. Which is why state legislatures, there's about 23 state legislatures right now, they have about 106 bills to make it harder to vote. This is being pushed by Republicans to make it harder to vote. Cory Booker reintroduced the Justice for Black Farmers Act, which will address discrimination and injustices committed against Black farmers by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This is historical. Senator Cory Booker introduced his bill last fall and was endorsed by more than 100 groups representing farmers of color, but it died in committee because it ain't enough in the Senate to support it. Okay, but that was last fall. But now, so Republicans were in control last fall. Democrats are in control now of the Senate. But it's 50-50 with Kamala Harris as the tiebreaker. Now, what people have to understand is that Reverend Raphael Warnock, and we'll talk about this some more tomorrow, Reverend Raphael Warnock is finishing out he just won January 5th, okay, the runoff election, which in that the runoff election law in Georgia is rooted in racism. That goes back to 1963, and State Representative Denmark Groover, who was a segregationist, a staunch segregationist in the Georgia state legislature, who pushed for that law to be put in place, and is designed to lock African Americans out of statewide political power. U.S. Senator, governor, attorney general, statewide races. It was designed to lock them out. Reverend Raphael Warnock has to run for re-election next year, 2022. The 2022 midterm elections, Reverend Raphael Warnock of Georgia has to run for re-election because he's finishing out. There's 2 years left in that term of that Senate seat he just won. Republicans in Georgia are trying to win back that Senate seat, and they want to lock Stacey Abrams. They want to defeat Stacey Abrams in the 2024 gubernatorial race because they know she's going to run for governor in 2024. So this is why we have to understand political self-defense, because when there are gains and advances that African Americans make, there are opposing forces who are always trying to take us back. This is why you have to understand political self-defense and understand how to protect against those threats coming and protect gains that were made. You got to build upon that. We can't go to sleep and let Reverend Raphael Warnock lose that Senate seat and then let Stacey Abrams lose in 2024. We have to be able to protect those gains and build upon them and see these threats coming. We have to practice political self-defense. Okay, now, what was it? Okay, lastly, because this is enough radio for one day. Let's go back to this one here. I want to play this. We're going to wrap up with this clip from ABC Channel 7. And this deals with the first story we started out with the African American couple. And you see all this that I'm talking about is a legacy of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, racism, and it's all dealing with laws. It's all dealing with laws that were put in place to maldistribute wealth, power, and resources into the hands of Europeans. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. And this is all dealing with the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. Okay, let's go here. And there's one other article I could show you, and this is really, really going to wrap it up, which will really drive all this home. If you, for people who may still be lost and say, oh, they just need to try harder. If they just tried harder, they'll be more successful. So there was an article from NPR, National Public Radio, NPR.org. And it dealt with legacy of segregation. Oh, right here. This is it right here. I posted this a few weeks ago. Now, I dealt with this story when it came out. May 3rd, 2017. Oh, there's a good one right here. Because I love it when I hear these simple Simon as black Republicans running around who are against restitution, against reparations, that don't ever want to talk about the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, don't want to deal with the laws and policies put into place, just want to deal with personal success stories. Don't want to talk about laws and anything like that. Want to act like white supremacy and racism don't exist. A forgotten history of how the U.S. government segregated America. May 3rd, 2017. I got a ton of evidence. I have thousands of articles. A forgotten history of how the U.S. government segregated America. It's from National Public Radio, written by Terry Gross. In 1933, faced with a housing shortage, now this is during the Great Depression, same time 1933, okay, you go back to Herbert Hoover, 1928, stock market crash, October 1929, 1930, see, in the 30s, keep in mind, we talked about this a couple nights ago, the U.S. deported 1.8 million Mexicans back to Mexico because they said they were taking jobs away from white people. 60% of them were Mexican Americans born here legally, because during the Great Depression, they said they were taking jobs away from white people. In 1933, faced with a housing shortage, the federal government began a program explicitly designed to increase and segregate America's housing stock. The federal government began a program explicitly designed to increase and segregate America's housing stock. Author Richard Rothstein says the housing programs begun under the New Deal were tantamount to a state-sponsored segregation program. A state-sponsored system of segregation, I should say. The government's efforts were primarily designed to provide housing to white middle-class, lower middle-class families, he says. African Americans and other people of color were left out of the new suburban communities and pushed instead into urban housing projects. Now, see what I find interesting. When you got these Larry Elders and these black conservatives that don't want to call out white supremacy and racism because they know the checks are stopping, they'll lose their TV shows or radio shows, whatever they have. The white woman they're married to, the divorce them, all that stuff, right? They get left out the wheel and everything. Why don't they talk about leveling the playing field and telling white people to try harder? Because all these policies and laws are put in place to maldistribute wealth, power, and resources into the hands of white people. So why don't they tell them to level the playing field and tell white people to try harder? I just find that interesting. See, they don't want to deal with anything like this. The government's efforts were, quote, primarily designed to provide housing to white, middle class, lower middle class families, he says, African Americans and other people of color were left out of the new suburban communities in general and pushed instead into urban housing projects. Now, Richard Rothstein's new book, The Color of Law, came out in 2017, examines the local, state, and federal housing policies that mandated segregation. He notes that the Federal Housing Administration, there it is again, the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, which was established in 1934 as part of the New Deal. Now, there were some policies in the New Deal that helped African Americans, and because we're dealing with extreme poverty during the Great Depression. But even those policies still discriminated against us, but they did give us some type of resources. But these policies are going to help widen the racial wealth gap, especially the GI Bill of 1944, especially the GI Bill. Now, he notes that the Federal Housing Administration, which was established in 1934, furthered the segregation efforts by refusing to insure mortgages in and near African American neighborhoods, a policy known as, there's that word again, redlining, which was government policy. Now, this don't have nothing to do with trying harder. Why don't you tell them to try not to discriminate against African Americans? At the same time, the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, was subsidizing builders who were mass producing entire subdivisions for white people with the requirement that none of the homes be sold to African Americans. Now, Richard Rothstein says these decades-old housing policies have had a lasting effect on American society. The segregation of our metropolitan areas today leads to stagnant inequality because families are much less able to be upwardly mobile when they're living in segregated neighborhoods where opportunity is absent. Now, we're not, in general, when we talk about segregated neighborhoods, in general, we're not talking about an affluent African American neighborhood that has all the amenities and better quality schools, things like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about being segregated out of opportunity. Okay, when we talk about segregation, we're talking about being segregated out of opportunity and lacking those amenities and lacking the libraries and the grocery stores and see, another thing that ties into this is when you have these underserved populations, there's also a lack of hospitals in, close proximity. There's a lack of pharmacies in close proximity. It's all connected. Okay, so when we talk about segregation, we're not. I'm not saying okay, we have to live with white people to be able to have equality. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about being segregated out of opportunities. Okay, so we have to understand. But now, and then deal with the legacy, deal with what these laws did, and because if you had predominantly African American communities, but the homes were not undervalued, and they had the same amenities and quality schools and healthcare and hospitals and libraries and parks and things like this that white communities have, well, we wouldn't be having this argument. But when you have the segregation of the communities, they're lacking all these other things, which contributes to a cycle of poverty. The food deserts, lack of health care, increase in environmental racism, increases in pollution in those areas, increases in the potential for contaminated water, higher levels of lead in the water. That's the legacy of segregation. Okay. So let's just fast forward this right quick for the sake of, Lord, we gotta get out of here. on how the Federal Housing Administration justified discrimination. How the Federal Housing Administration, government entity, justifies segregation. The Federal Housing Administration's justification was that if African Americans bought homes in these suburbs, or even if they bought homes near these suburbs, the property values of the homes they were insuring, the white homes that they were insuring, would decline. And therefore, their loans would be at risk. There was no basis for this claim on the part of the FHA, Federal Housing Administration. In fact, when African Americans tried to buy homes in all white neighborhoods or in mostly white neighborhoods, property values rose because African Americans were more willing to pay more for properties than whites were, simply because their housing supply was so restricted. And they had so many fewer choices. So the rationale that the Federal Housing Administration used was never based on any kind of study. It was never based on reality. Okay? And then they talk about how federal agencies use redlining to segregate African Americans. Read this right here. Because see, the black conservatives don't want to deal with anything like this. Okay? The black conservatives don't want to deal with anything like this. A forgotten history of how the U.S. government segregated America. All right, so lastly, I want to go back to this clip here, dealing with this African American family. So you see all these stories we talked about are all related. And this once again is why America needs a massive history lesson. All this deals with history. If you're ignorant of history, you won't understand this. And you'll just say, oh, black people just need to try harder. You know, if you just got up 4 hours earlier and went to bed 4 hours later, if you just try harder, you could be equally successful. Okay, and we've got this one right here. So I want to go back to this clip here from ABC Channel 7 in Chicago, which dealt with this story of this couple in California, Paul and Tanisha Tate Austin. Okay, so let's go back to this clip here. I think we have to cue it up. Oh, man, hold on. Let's get past these ads. Okay, we'll go back to this. How's everybody doing? So be sure to read these articles. We'll talk about the Justice for Black Farmers Act on tomorrow's show, which again ties into laws and policies and structural historical inequities. It deals with the legacy of racism.
Certainly no secret that home ownership is the pathway to building wealth in America.
Is it going to start the... Okay, just a second. It's going to start the ad all over again. Just a minute here. Okay, so this is from ABC Channel 7. Black couple lowball by 500,000.
No secret that home ownership is the pathway to building wealth in America. But what's hard in the Bay Area is even harder for some.
And tonight, a look at the growing inequity in home ownership rates in the Bay Area. ABC 7 News and culture reporter Julian Glover has the story of a Marin couple who almost got cheated out of $500,000.
You know, I mean, it was work, but it was exciting.
Paul and his wife Tanisha Austin felt like they captured a slice of the American dream in 2016 when they purchased their first home together, this original Marin City pole home. But it wasn't without challenges.
As soon as like a house came on the market, you go in, you put your bid in, and then you get outbidded by like 100,000 or more rather quickly. And that can be, a little bit depressing.
They bought the home off market from another black family hoping to make homeownership a reality for a young black couple. After moving into the home built in the 1960s, the Austins staged major renovations, adding an entire floor and more than 1,000 square feet of space, along with a deck, new floors, a fireplace, and new appliances. Then they got it appraised.
I read the appraisal. I looked at the number. I was like, this is unbelievable.
The family tells me the appraiser was an older white woman, and they are convinced race was a factor. The home appraised for $989,000, just $100,000 more than the Austins got it appraised for before they started the work, despite $400,000 in renovations.
It was like, it was a slap in the face.
The Austins immediately called their lender and pushed back. After a month of escalating their complaints, they were approved for a second appraisal. When the date came, they got creative.
We had a conversation with one of our white friends, and she is like, no problem. I'll be Tanisha. I'll bring over some pictures of my family. She made our home look like it belonged to her.
And it worked.
So it appraised for 1.482.
Yeah.
Which was 50% more than what it appraised for by a couple weeks prior.
Almost 1.5, $500,000 more.
The Austins were outraged and believe this is another ugly result of larger systemic issues.
There are implications of the ability to create generational wealth or pass things on if our house is appraised for 50% less than what is valued at.
We know discrimination is in nearly every aspect of the home buying process, and really we need to be addressing it as an industry.
Discrimination in the housing market comes in many forms and has a long history in our country and in the Bay Area, leading to alarmingly low rates of Black Americans owning their own home. Black homeownership lags across the country, with less than half, only 44% of Black Americans owning their own home in 2020. Compare that to 74% for white Americans. Looking at the Golden State, just 34% of Black Californians own a home. In the Bay Area, those numbers are even lower. Just 33% of Black San Francisco residents own a home, compared to 61% of white San Franciscans. The numbers are more drastic in San Jose, with a Black homeownership rate of 31% and a white homeownership rate of 65%, more than double.
Why are we seeing such a great disparity?
There's still problems in the housing industry of Black people being steered away from white neighborhoods, even though that is technically illegal, or Black people not having the same access to mortgages that white people have.
According to the National Association of Realtors, Black applicants are rejected for mortgage loans at rates 3 times higher than that of white applicants. Another factor suppressing Black homeownership.
African Americans have nearly double the amount of student loan debt than we see for white homebuyers. So that's just one of the many hurdles that African American homebuyers are really strapped with and holds back their buying power.
And the pandemic has made things worse. The representative from NAR stressed closing the homeownership gap is essential to closing the wealth gap in our country. To make that happen, equity in housing and access to affordable homes must be the central focus. The Austins agree.
If we are aware that implicit bias exists in other systems, police, school, why wouldn't they also exist in the housing market? And then what can we do to, fix that?
There could be help on the way in the form of 2 Biden administration proposals. The first would extend $15,000 in down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. The other, a $100 billion fund to update existing and create new affordable housing. Covering race, culture, and social justice, Julian Glover, ABC 7 News.
All right. So excellent job, Julian Glover, also for ABC Channel 7 News. Okay. So check out this article here. Black couple's home was valued $500,000 higher after they had a white friend pose as the homeowner. It's from face-to-faceafrica.com. And then also ABC Channel 7 has the story as well. Okay, guys, look, hey, we're going to get out of here. If you like this type of information, you want to support the African History Network, you can do so through Cash App, $TheAHNShow, through Cash App, $TheAHNShow. Through Cash App, and then also paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. We posted a link here. It's also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Somebody brought it to my attention. There's this fake Cash App account that is similar to the AHN show, but it's not. That's why you want to make sure if you donate through Cash App, it's $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, because somebody else set one up that's similar, and I got to look into this because it's not us. It's $ TheAHNShow, SHOW. Okay. And then you can still register for our online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And that's at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, look, hey, we have to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct your own behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace.
With BlackBusinessT.com, the messages are clear and meaningful. Keep your business in the black and out of the red. Mind your black business. Know your numbers and plan strategically. Black Business Boss, lead your industry. Support black business, encourage, patronize, and uplift one another. BlackBusinessT.com currently has products sold in Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles, with proceeds returned to the black community. They have a wide selection of hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, hats, sweatshirts that support black-owned businesses. Visit the website blackbusinesstee.com. That's blackbusinesstee.com.
Do you have an idea or business that requires app development or thinking of moving your IT resources to the cloud? We have post-paid and profit-sharing plans for unique ideas or profitable businesses. Who can take advantage of this unique program? Entrepreneurs with unique ideas, startups, small to medium businesses. Contact us, 267-209-0352.
Visit nomadicsystems.net, nomadicsystems.net today. Intuitive Design Clothing is an online accessory store that sells one-of-a-kind signature statement pieces for men and women. They also specialize in fashion consultations, closet organization, and decorating small spaces. Are you looking for a statement piece for a special affair, or would you like to add some select pieces to your ensemble of accessories? If you're looking for something different, definitely contact Kathy Norman, and CEO of Intuitive Design Clothing. Visit their website, intuitivedesignClothing.com. That's intuitivedesignClothing.com, and you can email her at info@intuitivedesignClothing.com. Intuitive Design Clothing is where every entrance is a grand entrance. Soul Natural Beauty Products offers organic, plant-based skin and hair care products that will rejuvenate skin and naturally grow and thicken hair. Their whipped shea butter can heal or restore damaged skin cells to prevent hyperpigmentation and skin breakouts. All products are made with organic plant-based ingredients. Their maximum hair growth oil is fortified with organic herbal extracts and undeniably proves that Mother Nature knows best. It thickens, lengthens, softens, and conditions all types of hair. They even guarantee hair improvement within 90 days or a full refund. Their all-natural 24-hour deodorant leaves the body smelling fresh without sweating for up to 24 hours. It does not stain fabric, goes on smoothly, and has a refreshing lavender and frankincense aroma. It can be used by men, women, and even children. Place your order today at soulnaturalbeautyproducts.com. That's soulnaturalbeautyproducts.com, and follow them on Facebook at Soul Natural Beauty Products. Yaya Rule is a line of African print-inspired apparel catered to the black community. The pieces include t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, jackets, dresses, skirts, activewear, bags, and other accessories and home decor. This brand offers a revived way for men and women to wear their black pride and honor their African heritage anywhere at any time. This apparel line is for anyone, whether you are working in the corporate world, are an entrepreneur, or an artist. Their selection will allow you to casually let your pride shine or dress it up as wanted. It is for those who have already embraced African fabrics and for those who are just getting introduced to them. Reclaim and experience a part of our culture with rich and colorful African prints. The clothing line and the accessories are available right now starting at $17.99. For more information on the new items and accessories, visit YaYaRule.com.
Are you getting ready for fall or winter? We have the solution for all seasonal clothing needs. KemeticWear.com is the go-to online source for Kemetic African fashion and lifestyle products with a contemporary twist. We're committed to offering unique styles reflecting our African heritage. KemeticWear.com is inspired by KemeticScribes.com to influence our people in learning and showing pride. Please visit our website at KemeticWear.com.
Have you tasted the world famous Frowny Brownie yet from the Pink Bakery?